Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched Promising Young Woman from 2020. Now, the title alone, the title's kind of brilliant. It implies a whole lot of things without specifying what the movie is. But it's the kind of turn of phrase that is so weird and stilted in a modern sociological sense that you have to think on it for a minute. This is a fascinating film, both in a literary sense and in a cinematic sense, and in a modern cultural and sociological sense. It is really excellent, in really all respects, and it is difficult to talk about for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is the subject matter itself. The Even the way that it talks about its own subject matter is brilliantly calculated in order to with what it does say and what it doesn't say, both literally and figuratively. There are words that it refuses to use, and it is very apparent that they were very careful, or rather, the writer and director, Emerald Fennell, was very careful to not use certain words and not not directly point out certain elements of the plot, and certain elements of the discussions. Both, I mean, the reasoning could be any number of things, and is probably a number of things, but part of it is because it is very meta in its reflection of what it is talking about. Frankly, I'm a little worried about, well, nobody's watching my videos anyway. I'm a little worried about talking about it because YouTube itself, with its automated scanning, picks up words, and if it picks up certain words, flags videos. But this is important, so and nobody watches these anyway. But it's a video, or it's a movie about sexual assault and rape and the culture that surrounds a pervasive culture of, for want of anything more specific, general disrespect to women and to some very serious topics, and how the perpetuation of these bad behaviors, and the cultural allowance for the continuation of these problems, leaves far too much room for such a serious topic to go undiscussed. And that is what's really fascinating to me about the script. I think it's a subtle thing. I think if you're not looking for it, you may not notice. But there are words that it does not use. There's even there is a moment in the film where it explicitly points it out, where it's like, it sort of momentarily breaks the fourth wall. Not really. It sort of like brushes up against it, as a reminder of, like, this is the thing we're talking about, and your discomfort in the character's discomfort is reflective of a cultural discomfort, and these other elements of the world that we live in and the culture that we live in, and this like this assumed sort of progressive view on how women should be treated is really not very solid, compared to what people like to believe it is. I could just go off on a tangent about this for an extended period. And I'm also trying to be really careful about not spoiling the contents of the plot. Because the way that it unfolds is really brilliant. It is up and down really well produced. I had no idea that this was one, an original screenplay, two, a screenplay from a first time screenplay writer, and three, that it was directed by that same person. That is impressive on its own, as I've mentioned before. But then to execute this movie as well as it is executed is fantastic. It is a beautiful film when it wants to be, and a very ugly film when it wants to be. There is a control of the image on screen and the sound and the lighting that looks not like a first-time director in the least. I am incredibly impressed with basically all of the production values all over this. And like I've already said, the writing is impeccable. The things that they choose to say and choose not to say, the way that the things that characters say and don't say, things that the things that characters imply with their choice of words and avoid, and the way it plays off of both some social and cultural norms in how we discuss certain topics, but also reflects upon sort of a cinematic, some cinematic history and some cinematic normalcy, things that are seen as sort of normal in cinema that are upended or reflected or parodied or satirized is really fascinating. And throughout, despite some really heavy content from beginning to end, it manages to do everything that it does with a subtlety that I am just really impressed by. Like I said, there are a few moments where it very deliberately brushes up against the fourth wall, or against a more real aspect of the story, that seems to be more reflective of like a genuine like statement to the world that watches this film, to say reflect upon yourself, but never in a way that feels immersion breaking, or like, obviously this could very easily devolve into a hammering over the head situation, where the it just goes, it loses the subtlety and just wants to hit you over the head with it. Before I get to talking more about the cinematic aspect, I do want to especially compliment the casting. The casting is impeccable. It is an ensemble cast of sorts. There's a lot of minor characters throughout the film, with some really great castings. The primary character, the main character, is played by Carey Mulligan, who I know I've seen in some things before, but couldn't place her directly. And sort of one of her main character counterparts, or secondary characters, is played by Bo Burnham, who I think a lot of people are aware of at this point, who does a really, really great job of playing a character who I want to be very careful with what I say here. Playing a character who has a lot of nuance, but also plays to a lot of tropes in just enough ways to to play the character he's supposed to play perfectly. Uh, his acting is impeccable, and there, as with a lot of the minor characters castings, there's a fascinating number of male characters who are actors who are historically cast as sort of the nice guy or the kind of nerdy guy or sort of like the soft and lovable character. And it's like that's not across the board, but like that helps to like secondarily, tertiarily be a reminder that part of what the movie is talking about is that it's not always the like the skeezy guy, the like really overt monster or something like that who's the problem, you know. It can be anyone, and to some extent everyone, in being complicit in problematic behavior. There are a number of other actors who are all fantastic in this. I'm not going to go down the list, but everybody's everybody's great. Honestly, I'm just really enamored with the cast. But to what I was talking about just now about the sort of the characters not necessarily being overtly threatening, and the subtlety that the movie manages to ride is really reflective of some interesting things from sort of dead genres, mostly dead genres. I would consider this to be like it's a black comedy for the most part, I would say. It really touches on a lot of different genres in certain elements. And throughout the course of the film, there are ups and downs. There's really, I think, to me, it feels like three major sections of the film, and each one feels somewhat dramatically different while still carrying a really strong narrative and tone through line throughout the whole thing. But I think there would probably be a lot of temptation to compare this to a genre that sort of died in the 90s, which is the like what's generally referred to as a rape revenge film, where you have it's like a borderline horror film basically, and they're not very subtle. They're a lot of them are sort of horror and exploitation ish in their structure, where the beginning somewhere in the beginning of the film, a woman is abused, and a substantial amount of the film is then the woman getting her revenge for the things that happened to her or to other people. Often, I mean, it's a problematic genre all over the place. It's also not usually a very nuanced one, and really upends its own, I would say, intentions, but I think the intention is for that's a whole other discussion. But it's like the intention for a film like that is much more towards the like sex and violence side of those movies, and I think there's a lot of very problematic the term I would use is gaze, about how those films are scripted and how they are presented, where usually the wronged woman is presented as sort of this avatar of feminine rage but also portrayed as a sexual object, who is objectified by the film, from beginning to end. And it's more about an arc of like that character's evolution from weakness to strength, to put it charitably. Anyway, there's a tangent of its own that I will slightly deviate back from before I go too far off. And this movie knows that it looks like one of those, and it leans into it deliberately. And it does so as a hook for all of the other things that it's actually doing. The appearance of a rape revenge film really is sort of the hooks the interest, and especially early on in the film, with the most tiny of spoilers. It's like at the very beginning, it looks very much like that. It looks like the introduction to the character looks like it's trying to tell us that that's what the movie is. And then it gives it enough time for us to start believing it. It doesn't rip it out from under you within like a few minutes. But the slow transition away from that and to a better understanding, better but not complete understanding of who the character is, and what she's gone through, and it gives you more hints of what you're getting into, to the point that you don't really fully understand the character by the end either. But there is a constant evolution of your understanding throughout the entire course of the film. And upon a second viewing, I am very curious what my view would be and how I would see some of those early scenes differently. It's just it's really brilliant. It's not perfect, but it's very, very smart. And it it satirizes enough of its own content, and as well as the world in which it's been made, basically, that I think that it stays in the black comedy area and really avoids, like I said earlier, one of the major pitfalls, which could have been feeling preachy or like it's hitting you over the head. It's very, very smart and very subtle and very careful, not to do those things. I already sort of talked about how the pacing is really excellent, and how it's broken up into these sections that work really, really well. I'll try not to keep going off on that, but it is just it's worth studying. It's fascinatingly well done. As far as the other production content of the film, like often with these films, I will go and watch a trailer after I watch the film to see how it was presented. And the trailers for this are obviously fucking awful. Whatever trailer house cut them is, one, it spoils a lot of content, but two, it spoils it wrong. It presents a very different film from what the film actually is. So I would highly suggest, if you have any interest in this at all, I mean, don't ever watch trailers, but especially not one with a film like this. It also reminds me that the music in this film is really, really good. Like, all of the sound design is really good. There's some nice subtle sound editing, and it is pretty minimalist in its score, except for at the moments when it knows it needs to put something in. And There are a couple of there are a couple of both original. Well, there's some original music that seems to be very good. Some sort of time sensitive music that is used sparingly as like a reflection of a time and place that is being reflected upon. Like this is set in a modern setting, but it's reflecting on, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and sort of how the culture of that time reflects the culture of this time. And it uses a couple of like established songs as well as a couple of interesting and really well produced covers and like re-instrumentations that adapt really well for the soundtrack. It is one thing that I think used improperly or viewed with a different eye might seem a little heavy-handed, but I think it keeps the film a little bit more grounded in a specific time and place. And obviously, this is a film that is about the current period, and 10 years from now might seem a little different or might seem a little less, a little more foreign to someone who is either, of high school or college age right now, or might be high school or college age in 10 years. So I'm actually really sort of fascinated whether this has long-term legs for a film that is very grounded in a specific time and place. Yeah, I'm sure I could keep talking about this film. I think it's really excellent. I'm very impressed with basically all aspects of it. My my any concerns I have with it are extremely minimal, and it did not perform super well, but it didn't get a very wide release either, and also it was released in 2020, so it wasn't going to perform very well then either. I think it did win some awards, which hopefully gives it a bit more longevity, but definitely deserves, I think, wider recognition and acclaim. And as far as the writer and director, I will be very eager to see what she works on next. And has given me some reflection on some of the actors as well, to see a different. Some of them play some different characters than they usually play, and so I'm a little bit more impressed with like, oh, that character can, that actor can play that character, and it works really really well. Anyway, I'll stop going on and on, but if you can stomach the content, and it does avoid being graphic really at any point, then I highly recommend it. So, yeah. Thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist. That's my name. I can stumble over it if I want to. And I'll see you guys next time.